When Dyke awoke, he was disoriented, his body aching from the abuse it had endured. He could smell something cooking, and as he sat up, confusion washed over him. "Where am I?" he muttered, looking around the unfamiliar room. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Elizabeth rushed out of the kitchen, relief flooding her face. "Thank the gods, you're awake," she exclaimed, hurrying to his side. "How are you feeling?" Dyke blinked up at her, still groggy. I'm fine. Who are you?" "It's me, Elizabeth. You met me by the river. Don't tell me you've forgotten?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. Dyke sighed, struggling to remember. "Elizabeth, yes, I remember your name. But everything else is blurry. How did I get here?" "You were badly hurt. I found you and brought you here to help. Do you remember what happened to you?" Elizabeth asked, her voice filled with curiosity and concern. Dyke's face darkened as memories began to return. "I was traveling with Amaka. We were ambushed. The guards. They were slaughtered." His voice faltered, pain etched across his features. Elizabeth's heart skipped a beat. "Amaka? You mean Princess Amaka? Is she the love of your life?" Dyke nodded weakly. "Yes, she is." "Why do you ask?" Elizabeth's mind raced, the pieces slowly falling into place. Elizabeth sat by the fire, her thoughts swirling in confusion and unease. She had been tending to Dyke's wounds for days, but something about his story gnawed at her mind. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably until Elizabeth could no longer bear it. She finally turned to Dyke, her voice hesitant but firm. "Dyke," she began, her brow furrowed, "something doesn't add up. How did you get those injuries? And why were you all alone, barely alive when I found you? You said Amaka defeated the bounty hunters. What really happened?" Dyke shifted uncomfortably, his eyes distant as he recalled the events of that night. His voice was soft, heavy with the weight of memory. "We did manage to escape at first. Amaka fought them off by the river, and we thought it was over. We sat down, just for a moment, to catch our breath. But they came back," he said, his tone darkening. "The bounty hunters, those who had escaped, returned in the dead of night." Elizabeth's heart raced. "But surely Amaka could still handle them," she pressed, her voice rising slightly. "There were fewer of them than before, right?" Dyke nodded, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "You're right. She could have. She was winning, too. But they were smart this time. Some of the men ambushed me from behind, held me down. They tortured me, threatened to kill me if Amaka didn't surrender." Dyke's voice cracked, and his eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "Amaka, she didn't want to give up, but she had no choice. She couldn't let them kill me, so she surrendered. She gave herself up to save me." His voice trailed off into a broken whisper. "And that was the last time I saw her." He clenched his fists, his knuckles white with tension. "It's my fault," he murmured, his voice thick with sorrow. "If it weren't for me, she would have escaped. She would be free." Elizabeth's chest tightened as she watched him. The weight of his guilt was palpable, but she knew there was something she had to confess. She couldn't carry the burden alone any longer. With a deep breath, she spoke, her voice trembling. "No, Dyke. It's not your fault. It's mine." Dyke looked up sharply, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Elizabeth hesitated, the shame choking her words. "You might not know this, but Amaka and I were once best friends. I think I betrayed her." A heavy silence fell between them, stretching on as Dyke stared at her, his face twisted in disbelief. His mind raced, processing her confession, and slowly, his expression hardened. A deep frown etched into his face as realization dawned. "What do you mean, betrayed?" he asked slowly, his voice edged with suspicion. "Are you telling me you're the reason those men came after us?" You're the one who sent them? Dyke's voice rose in anger, but before he could say more, Elizabeth shook her head frantically, tears brimming in her eyes. No, no, that's not what happened. But I may have had a hand in it. Dyke's brow furrowed, his anger giving way to confusion. What do you mean? Elizabeth took a deep, shuddering breath. A few days ago, Precious Amaka's sister came to me. She was desperate. She asked me to help her bring Amaka down because Amaka was about to marry you and inherit the throne, something Precious always coveted. Dyke's eyes widened, his voice low and incredulous. Precious? Amaka's sister? He scoffed, shaking his head. No wonder she didn't give me the time of day at the palace. I should have known. Elizabeth nodded sadly. Yes, she was jealous, consumed by envy. And I helped her. Dyke stared at her, his mouth slightly open in shock. Helped her? How? Elizabeth swallowed hard. I introduced her to a powerful witch. It was my idea to use dark magic to manipulate King David's mind, to make him act in her favor. I thought it would just weaken Amaka's influence at court, but I never imagined it would lead to this. To bounty hunters, to death. Dyke leaned forward, his voice urgent. Wait, are you saying Precious used magic to control the king? Elizabeth nodded miserably. Yes. I believe Precious had the witch grant her power to sway the king's decisions, to make him send those bounty hunters after Amaka. It was her first move, testing the limits of her power. Dyke shook his head in disbelief. And you went along with this? You helped Precious because you hated Amaka too? Elizabeth's voice wavered. I didn't hate her. I was jealous, hurt. When Precious came to me, I was weak. And now, 3 innocent guards are dead because I helped her. I haven't had a moment's peace since that day. The room fell into a tense, suffocating silence. Dyke's eyes were cold as he stared at Elizabeth, his hands trembling in quiet rage. He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself before speaking again. This doesn't change the fact that Amaka is still being held somewhere by the king, under Precious's spell. We need to save her. But how? Elizabeth lifted her head, determination flashing in her eyes. There might be a way. Have you heard of the shrine in the Agbeji Evil Forest? Dyke frowned. Yes, Amaka and I were headed there. We were seeking a cure for her curse. That shrine is said to have the power to grant any wish. Elizabeth nodded, her voice resolute. Exactly. We need to go there, make a wish to break the king's enchantment and free Amaka. But we have to act fast, before the king or Precious does something irreversible. Dyke stood up slowly, rolling his shoulders as if preparing for battle. Then we have no time to waste. As the two prepared to leave, the door slammed open. Elizabeth's father stormed into the room, his voice booming with anger. Elizabeth, you've kept this man here all day. How dare you disobey us? Elizabeth turned to face her father, her eyes blazing with defiance. I couldn't send him away before he was healed. If you only cared about other people the way you care about the royal family and Precious. Her father's face flushed with fury. How dare you speak to me that way? Have you lost your mind? Dyke, sensing the escalating tension, intervened. Sir, I apologize for overstaying. I will leave now. He turned to go, but Elizabeth grabbed his arm. Wait, let me come with you. We need to stop this madness together. Her father shouted after her, but Elizabeth didn't look back. She walked out into the night with Dyke, her heart heavy but determined. Together, they would confront the darkness that had taken hold of the kingdom. The next morning, worried about Elizabeth's whereabouts, her parents rushed to the palace. They were escorted into the grand halls, where Precious awaited them, her smile cold and calculating. What brings you here, noble parents of Elizabeth? She asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Elizabeth's father shifted uneasily, his brow furrowing with concern. "It's about your friend, Princess Amaka." Precious's eyes narrowed with curiosity. "What about her?" "She ran away with a wounded man last night," he replied, his voice laced with anxiety. "Since then, we haven't seen her." "A wounded man, you say?" Precious's heart raced, and suspicion crept into her voice. "Can you provide a more detailed description of this man?" "Yes, my princess," Elizabeth's father continued, his voice steady yet filled with urgency. "He was a young, handsome man dressed in rugged hunter attire, but his body was marked with injuries, as though he had just emerged from a fierce battle." A heavy silence fell between them, and Precious's mind raced as she processed the implications. Her suspicions were almost confirmed. And where exactly did Elizabeth find this wounded man? "By the river that demarcates our kingdom from the Asha evil forest," her father replied, a hint of worry in his tone. As soon as Precious heard this, her pulse quickened. It became clear to her that the man in question was Dyke, and Elizabeth's association with him could pose a significant threat to her newfound power. She quickly dismissed Elizabeth's parents, assuring them she would locate their daughter soon. However, deep inside she schemed, knowing she needed to act swiftly. Later that night, Precious summoned Ruth, the leader of the Asha, for a clandestine meeting. When he arrived, they strolled outside the palace, the moonlight filtering through the trees, casting an ethereal glow around them. They stopped beneath a sprawling oak, its branches swaying gently in the night breeze. Suddenly, Rook swept Precious off her feet, kissing her with a fervor that momentarily stole her breath away. "Precious, my love, I am so glad you called me tonight. What do you have planned for us?" But the moment of tenderness quickly faded as Precious pushed him away, her voice rising with frustration. "You said you loved me, yet you didn't do what I asked." Rook's expression shifted to one of confusion. "What are you talking about, my love? I have done everything you asked of me thus far." "Then why didn't you kill the bastard hunter who was with my sister?" she exclaimed, her anger crackling in the air. "You had the chance to eliminate him?" Rook's gaze hardened. "Keeping him alive was our only means to force Amaka to surrender herself to us as our captive. But now that she is imprisoned, we can pursue that hunter and secure your future as our next queen, with me by your side." "Very well," Precious retorted, determination igniting within her. "Tomorrow is the day you'll put your sword where your mouth is. I will follow you, but you better not mess it up again. Ready your Asha for tomorrow. We hunt the hunter." Princess Precious, the evil sister Princess Amaka, was consumed by jealousy and hatred. Determined to prevent her sister from marrying Dyke, a humble hunter, Precious devised a sinister plan. She believed that if Dyke married Amaka, he would not only take her sister, but also the throne that Precious coveted. In the dimly lit chambers of her castle, she concocted a deadly potion, vowing to eliminate Dyke once and for all. One day, as Dyke was setting his traps deep in the forest, Princess Precious approached him, her intentions masked by a sweet smile. She offered him a drink, pretending to extend a gesture of goodwill, but Dyke sensed something was off. Before he could accept or refuse, an arrow shot through the air and landed between them. Princess Amaka had arrived just in time, bow drawn and ready to protect the man she loved. The confrontation between the sisters was intense. Precious accused Amaka of stealing the throne that rightfully belonged to her. Amaka, however, stood her ground, declaring that the throne could never be ruled by hatred and jealousy. Precious, seething with anger, taunted both Dyke and Amaka, but they refused to be swayed by her venomous words. In a final moment of defeat, Precious retreated into the shadows, vowing that this battle was far from over. Her twisted ambition would not allow her to rest until she had claimed the power she believed was hers. As the sun set over the forest, Dyke and Amaka stood together, knowing that while the immediate danger had passed, their troubles were far from over. The bond between them strengthened. They prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united against the looming threat of Princess Precious. In the dead of night, Precious, her eyes gleaming with malice, led the raid on Dyke's secluded house. Beside her stood Farouk, the formidable leader of the Ashimari warriors, his presence alone sending a wave of intimidation through his men. Precious had meticulously planned this ambush, convinced that this night would mark the end of Dyke and Elizabeth's defiance. She imagined the look of fear on their faces as her soldiers tore through their home. With a swift signal from Precious, the Ashimari warriors stormed the cabin, their footsteps heavy against the wooden floors. Farouk remained calm and calculated, observing his men as they swept through the rooms, searching every corner, every hiding spot. But to their surprise, they found nothing. The house was eerily empty. No one was there to greet them, no one to resist. Precious, growing impatient, entered the house herself. Her gaze fell upon small, telling details. A pot of tea, still warm, rested on the table, its steam curling lazily into the air. The fire in the hearth crackled gently, as if it had only been tended to minutes ago. The chairs, slightly askew, suggested a hasty departure. Dyke and Elizabeth had been here recently. The signs of their escape were too fresh to ignore. "They were here," Farouk muttered, his eyes narrowing as he examined the scene. Precious clenched her fists, fury building within her. They had been so close, just moments away from capturing their prey, yet Dyke had slipped through their fingers once again. "Search the perimeter," she ordered, her voice low but filled with venom. "They can't have gone far." Farouk nodded and immediately sent his warriors to comb the nearby woods, determined not to let Dyke and Elizabeth escape so easily. Precious, meanwhile, stood in the middle of the now empty home, her mind racing. Dyke was proving to be more resourceful than she had anticipated, and Elizabeth was more than just a damsel at his side. They had outmaneuvered her this time, but Precious vowed there would be no second escape. The hunt was far from over. As the glow of the dying embers cast flickering shadows across the room, Precious stood with her arms crossed, her piercing gaze locked on Farouk. The weight of their failure lingered in the air, thick with unspoken accusations. Precious, never one to tolerate mistakes, felt a surge of distrust bubbling within her. "How did they know, Farouk?" Her voice was low, controlled, but the sharpness in her tone cut through the silence like a blade. She took a step closer to him, eyes narrowed in suspicion. "They were here, mere moments before we arrived. It's as if they knew we were coming." Farouk, towering and stoic, met her gaze with calm, though a flicker of frustration crossed his face. "Are you suggesting I betrayed you?" His voice rumbled deep and steady, but there was a tension in his words. He knew where this was headed, and it ignited a spark of anger in him. Precious didn't flinch, her suspicion unrelenting. "You've been by my side for years, Farouk, but even the most loyal warriors can be swayed. Information like this doesn't just slip through cracks," someone warned them. "And right now, you're the only one with enough power to do so." Farouk's jaw clenched as he took a slow, measured breath. "You question my loyalty now? After everything I've done for you, for this cause?" His fists tightened, though he held back the rising frustration. "I have no reason to betray you, Precious. Dyke is a threat to everything we've worked for. If he marries Amaka, the throne is lost. Why would I ever help him?" Precious paced in front of him, her mind racing with doubt and paranoia. She had trusted Farouk with her most delicate plans, her most guarded secrets, but the sudden, timely escape of Dyke and Elizabeth gnawed at her. Could it be possible? Could Farouk have secretly forged an alliance behind her back? "I don't know," she admitted, her voice cold. "But someone betrayed me, and until I find out who, I can't trust anyone. Not even you." Her words were a blade, cutting through whatever bond they had shared. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with the weight of distrust. Farouk's eyes darkened, anger flaring behind his calm demeanor. "If you doubt me, precious, then perhaps you should find another to lead your warriors. But know this, I've bled for this mission. I will not tolerate baseless accusations." He turned away, refusing to engage further in this dangerous dance of suspicion, though the bitterness in his voice lingered in the air. Precious watched him in silence, her suspicion unresolved but unspoken for now. She knew she couldn't afford to lose Farouk's loyalty, but doubt was a dangerous seed, one that had already begun to take root. As Farouk exited the room, leaving her alone with her thoughts, Precious clenched her fists, determined to uncover the truth no matter the cost. In the dim light of the evening, the Ashimari warriors spread across Dyke's property like a pack of wolves on the hunt. Precious stood at the center of the chaos, her eyes scanning every corner, her frustration growing with each passing second. The empty house had offered no sign of Dyke or Elizabeth, only the unsettling clues of their hasty escape. She was about to call for a retreat when one of the warriors suddenly raised his hand, signaling for silence. "Wait," the warrior whispered, his ear cocked toward a faint noise. The others paused, tension thickening the air. The sound was subtle, like a shuffling beneath the earth, just barely audible over the breeze. His eyes darted to the ground near the edge of the yard, where a few wooden planks lay stacked haphazardly. "They're close," he murmured, his voice brimming with certainty. Without wasting a moment, Precious barked orders. "Search the yard. Tear everything down if you have to. They're hiding somewhere." Her soldiers sprang into action, ripping apart the flimsy structures scattered around the property tool sheds, wooden crates, and haystacks. The once quiet yard erupted into a frenzy of destruction, but with every shed they pulled apart, there was no sign of their quarry. Farouk joined the search, leading his warriors as they overturned barrels and pulled down stacks of lumber. The ground itself seemed to mock them, with every step feeling like they were just inches away from their target. But frustration mounted as, despite their efforts, Dyke and Elizabeth remained invisible. Beneath the surface, hidden deep underground in a concealed passageway, Dyke and Elizabeth held their breaths. Dirt fell in small clumps from the ceiling as the soldiers above stomped around, shaking the ground. Elizabeth's heart raced, her eyes wide with fear, while Dyke remained calm, his hand gripping hers tightly in the darkness. He knew the tunnels well. They had been his last resort, a place to hide from both man and beast in his many years as a hunter. Above, the soldiers tore apart the last of the structures, and the sound of splintering wood echoed through the yard. Precious grew impatient, her face twisted in fury as she scanned the area, certain that Dyke and Elizabeth were near, but still unable to find them. "Search harder," she yelled, her voice cracking with desperation. "They're here, I can feel it." But despite her orders, the Ashimari warriors were coming up empty. Dyke's underground hideout remained undetected, the entrance cleverly disguised beneath layers of earth and debris. As the soldiers' frenzy slowed, Precious frustration turned to bitter rage. "They won't stay hidden forever," she muttered under her breath, though her words were more a promise to herself than to anyone else. She would find them eventually, and when she did, there would be no more hiding. Dyke and Elizabeth sat quietly in the fading light of the day, the air thick with unspoken thoughts, as they prepared for their journey to the Agba forest. The soft crackle of a fire nearby accompanied the methodical movements of their hands, Dyke sharpening his blade, while Elizabeth carefully packed herbs into her satchel. Sensing a tension that had lingered between them, Dyke finally broke the silence, asking her what was on her mind. Elizabeth hesitated for a moment before opening up about something she had never shared with him before: the truth about her relationship with Princess Amaka. She spoke of a time when she and Amaka had been close friends, inseparable in their youth. Elizabeth had once believed their bond was unbreakable, sharing secrets and dreams with the princess. But that had been before her family's financial downfall. As Elizabeth recounted the memories, her voice wavered with the bitterness of betrayal. She explained how, during her family's crisis, she had turned to Amaka for help, expecting the support of a friend. But instead of aid, Amaka had turned her back, coldly distancing herself from Elizabeth's troubles. That moment had shattered their friendship and taught Elizabeth a harsh lesson about trust, especially with royalty. Dyke listened intently, his heart aching for her as she relived the pain of being abandoned by someone she had considered a sister. He reached out, taking her hand and offering quiet reassurance, telling her that her past didn't define her strength. Elizabeth smiled sadly, grateful for his words, but the wounds of her past still lingered. Thank you for watching this story. I truly appreciate everyone who has patiently waited for part 5. We're nearing the conclusion of this captivating tale of the big, muscular princess. If you want to see part 6 and wrap up this thrilling saga, please comment part 5 below. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family, and like and subscribe to the channel so you'll be the first to know when I release a new video. Thanks again for watching, and have a wonderful day.